You walk into a grocery store, you reach out, and you grab a single banana.
Right. Just a totally normal, everyday thing.
Exactly. It is probably the most mundane automatic action in the world. You don't stand there and think about the refrigerated cargo ship it came on, or the complex international trade agreements that made it affordable for you.
Yeah, or the highly specific microclimate in whatever country it was grown in.
Right. And you definitely aren't thinking about the intricate software that's tracking its exact expiration date. To you, to me, to anyone just doing their shopping, it's just a banana. You drop it in the cart and you move on.
Because it's entirely invisible to us. And, that invisibility is actually a luxury.
Oh, for sure.
We really only ever notice the sheer complexity of that global system when it fails. Like when a massive global event hits, say, the 2020 pandemic, and suddenly you walk into that same store and that exact same shelf is completely empty.
Right. And when the shelf goes bare, it's like, that invisible web of global trade abruptly becomes the only thing anyone can look at.
It's all you can see.
Yeah, it's like when the lights suddenly get turned on in a dark room and you see the absolute chaos that was surrounding you the whole time. And that sudden visibility of complex, hidden systems is exactly what we are unpacking in our deep dive today.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. We are exploring a stack of sources today that takes that exact feeling, that sudden realization of how fragile the world is, and turns it into a unified way of seeing everything. We're diving into the interconnected writings, the business ventures, and honestly, just the brilliant mind of Liat Portal.
Yeah, Liat is a San Francisco-based creator, a writer, and a supply chain tech founder.
Right, and the mission for you listening today is to explore how these seemingly completely disconnected domains all weave together into one unified worldview. We are going to connect messy data migrations from the 2000s, a daily plate of food, short-term inventory forecasting, and this is the big one, a very serious philosophical warning about how AI is quietly taking over human decision-making.
It sounds like a lot, but tracing Liat's journey actually provides this incredible masterclass in seeing the matrix of modern commerce.
Yeah, the matrix is a good way to put it.
We're going to follow her path from her early days in industrial engineering, right through those global supply chain shocks of COVID-19. We'll look at how she uses everyday grocery items to teach complex macroeconomics, too.
Which is such a cool concept. And then we'll dive into why a very specific 4 to 8 week planning window is literally the make or break horizon for businesses today.
Right. And finally, we'll unpack her powerful framework around what she calls authority drift.
So let's just start right at the origin story, because I think it grounds everything else we're going to talk about. Liat has this academic background in industrial management engineering, and she has an MBA. But the real spark, the moment the match is actually struck, happens in 2007.
Yeah, when she takes on this massive data migration role. Exactly. She's handling data migration for Israel's first major enterprise resource planning, or ERP, best practice project. And I just have to say, anyone who has ever tried to merge 2 different Excel spreadsheets knows it's a complete headache.
Oh, it's the worst.
Right. But doing this for a major national enterprise in the early 2000s, that is a whole different beast.
It really is. Think about the reality of unstructured data in that era. Before these massive unified software systems took over everything, every individual department, every warehouse, every regional office, they all had their own totally idiosyncratic ways of recording information.
Like Bob in accounting has his own system, and Sarah in the warehouse has hers.
Exactly. One warehouse might log a product under one specific code, while the corporate office uses a completely different naming convention for the exact same item.
Right, just a total mess. So Liat was spending these long nights and weekends trying to align this chaotic, localized data into a single functional system. And this wasn't just, a technical IT task. She was essentially building the foundation of data governance from the ground up.
Seeing firsthand how messy human decisions are eventually forced into these rigid data points.
Yeah, she was in the trenches.
And out of that experience, she makes this absolutely brilliant observation about this ERP tech giants, like the companies that were building these massive data systems at the time. She points out that they accidentally became the world's most influential educator.
It's such a great point.
Right, because by forcing companies to standardize their processes, they essentially taught a universal operational language to personnel all over the globe.
They really did establish a common tongue for global commerce. Because before this, as we said, local operations were highly siloed. But suddenly, if you wanted the new expensive software to actually work, you had to adopt its terminology.
You had to speak the software's language.
Right. Terms like purchase requests, purchase orders, material requirements, planning, the MRP systems, those all became standard vocabulary.
So it didn't matter where you were.
Exactly. Whether a floor worker was in a facility in China or Russia, India, Mexico, the language of the supply chain process became this shared global understanding. It educated a massive global workforce in a way that formal, traditional educational systems never, ever could have coordinated.
It is basically an accidental Rosetta Stone. You don't need to know the local language. You don't even need perfect English grammar.
Yeah.
If everybody in the warehouse and everybody in the corporate office speaks supply chain.
The software literally forced globalization to function.
Yeah. But then we fast forward to 2020, and we see the flip side of that hyper-connected system. The COVID-19 shock hits. And we had spent decades building these incredibly lean, just-in-time supply chains. Everything was highly efficient, very cost-effective, perfectly synced up.
Until it wasn't.
Right. And then the whole system just breaks.
Because that level of globalization meant that a disruption anywhere sent shockwaves absolutely everywhere. I mean, we built systems optimized purely for cost and speed, completely assuming the environment would just remain stable forever.
Which, obviously, it didn't.
Right. The pandemic proved that cheap, low-cost products depend on a highly fragile web. When one strand breaks, whether it's a closed port in Asia, a factory shutdown in Europe, or just a sudden massive spike in consumer demand in the U.S., the whole structure shudders.
Yeah, it forced everyone from these massive multinational organizations down to individual consumers to learn these brutal economic lessons that were never taught in a classroom.
We all got a crash course in supply chain logistics.
We really did. So she is clearly deep in the trenches of supply chain tech and logistics, right? But I do have to push back for a second here, because most people in tech, they stay very narrowly focused in their lane.
Oh, absolutely. They stick to their niche.
But Liat's platform, the Liat Show, covers tech, sure, but also food, architecture, and this is the wild part, even a deeply personal series analyzing Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, highlighting figures like Michael J. Fox and Ozzy Osbourne.
Right. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. For you listening, you might be wondering the same thing. How does analyzing the visible symptoms of Ozzy Osbourne's neurological condition make any sense sitting next to an essay on, like, global trade agreements?
On the surface, I agree. They look completely unrelated. But Liat explains this through her concept of a stable cognitive signature.
A stable cognitive signature. Okay, what does that mean?
Her argument is that while the subjects change wildly from rock stars to supply chains, her specific way of seeing the world remains totally consistent.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so whether she is analyzing how Parkinson's disease remains completely invisible in the body until the stress of the symptoms finally surfaces, or she's looking at the underlying load-bearing architecture of a building, or examining the hidden constraints of global trade, it is one continuous narrative identity.
So she's always looking for the same underlying patterns.
Exactly. She is always examining how complex systems behave under pressure. And interestingly, she actually notes that even AI models recognize this underlying consistency.
Wait, really? The AI can tell?
Yeah, the AI maps her incredibly diverse body of knowledge as a single unified author identity because the cognitive signature, the way she connects ideas, is so stable.
It is all the same creative frequency, just applied to different instruments. That makes so much sense. So if we take that lens, looking at how systems behave under pressure, and apply it back to those global supply chain shocks we were talking about, Liat realizes something really important.
That to understand the macro, you have to look at the micro.
Exactly. To truly understand the massive scale of global trade, you cannot just zoom out and look at satellite maps of cargo ships. It's way too abstract. You have to zoom in right down to the dinner plate.
Which is the driving philosophy behind her daily newsletter, Foodie Disorder.
Yes, Foodie Disorder. I love this.
It's brilliant. Every day, she serves up a post about a single everyday grocery item. It could be tahini, a fresh-cut fruit tray, cranberries, sushi, or, that banana you mentioned at the start of the deep dive.
But she isn't just sharing recipes or restaurant reviews, right?
Not at all. She's using these super mundane items as a magnifying glass to view the entire world.
Okay, I love this approach, but let's make it concrete for everyone listening. How exactly does a banana teach diplomacy? Because, when I look at a banana, I just see breakfast.
Right, but think about the journey of that banana. To understand why it costs what it does at the store, you have to trace where it grows.
Okay, so that brings in geography and climate.
Exactly. Then you look at why it grows in that specific region, which opens up conversations about historical agriculture and local economies. Then you examine the trade agreements required to move a highly perishable good across oceans before it rots.
Wow, so that is international relations and complex logistics.
Right. By tracing the physical reality of how that one piece of fruit reaches your table, you are organically learning the real cost of global conflict. You're learning the intricacies of macroeconomics without ever cracking open a textbook.
That is such a powerful alternative to traditional learning. I mean, if you hand a teenager a dry textbook on international trade tariffs, their eyes are going to glaze over immediately.
Oh, in 2 seconds.
But if you tell them, hey, your favorite snack is going to disappear from the shelves next week because of a geopolitical dispute over a shipping lane, suddenly they're paying attention.
Right. They become amateur economists overnight.
It teaches how countries depend on each other entirely outside the compulsory education system.
It makes the invisible systems visible and deeply relatable through experiential learning. The food on our plates basically becomes a proxy for understanding global stability.
Which is an amazing way to educate the next generation.
Uh-huh.
But here is this stark reality for the people trying to run businesses right now. Teaching kids via a bowl of soup is brilliant for the future, but food businesses operating in this incredibly volatile post-COVID world, they need to survive today.
The stakes are incredibly high right now.
Yeah, the supply chain is still pretty chaotic, and that urgent, immediate need is what leads Liat to co-found her company, Plantuit.
Right. And while Foodie Disorder explains the supply chain to the general public, Plantuit is an AI-powered platform built to solve a massive, ongoing structural failure happening inside those actual supply chains. Liat refers to this as the execution gap.
The execution gap. Okay, let's talk about this. This is the phenomenon where a retail company somehow has completely empty shelves in the front of the store, but a warehouse just stuffed full of that exact same product sitting in the back. And it's happening simultaneously.
Which sounds crazy when you think about it.
It does. How is that even possible with all the advanced software companies use today?
Well, it happens because traditional planning tools were designed for a totally different era. They rely heavily on aggregated long-term forecasts.
Meaning they look at the big picture over a long time.
Exactly. They look at historical data over months or even years. They smooth out all the day-to-day volatility, and they report to the executives that everything is stable and on track.
But the reality on the ground is completely chaotic.
Right. By the time those legacy systems register a sudden spike in demand or a delay in shipping, it is already way too late. The purchasing decisions have been made, the constraints are locked in, and the inventory is just sitting in the wrong place.
It is kind of like trying to guess the weather for next year. A 12-month long-range forecast is fine for getting a general idea of like when winter happens, but you cannot decide whether to bring an umbrella today based on it.
That's a perfect analogy. You need to know what is happening right in front of you.
Yeah, and Leah points out that for a business, the real action, the only time frame that actually matters is the 4 to 8 week planning window.
Right.
But I have to ask, why that specific window? Why not 2 weeks or, 12 weeks?
Because the 4 to 8 week window is the crucial horizon where you can still actually steer the ship.
Okay, break that down for me.
If you are looking only 2 weeks out, the ship has fully sailed, the products are already on the trucks, you can't change the order. If you look 12 weeks out, the data is too fuzzy and consumer demand is probably going to change anyway.
So 4 to 8 weeks is the sweet spot.
Exactly. In that 4 to 8 week zone, making decisions at the individual SKU level, meaning specific, distinct items rather than broad categories, can still be translated into real reversible actions.
Reversible decisions.
Okay.
Meaning a warehouse manager can look at the data and say, wait, demand for this specific brand of tahini is dropping. We could still call and cancel that incoming order. Or, hey, we need to ramp up production on the fresh-cut fruit right now.
Precisely. You have just enough time to adjust ordering, shift inventory between warehouses, alter production schedules, and actually manage replenishment. Liat has this incredibly blunt but super accurate saying, you cannot eat a forecast.
You cannot eat a forecast. I love that.
So true. A perfectly accurate macro-level prediction of consumer demand is completely useless if you do not have the physical time to move the actual inventory to meet it.
Right, because if a business misses this 4 to 8 week window, the constraints become irreversible. And that leads directly back to that execution gap we talked about. Massive stockouts where you lose sales, or massive waste where perishable food literally just rots in a warehouse.
Yeah, it's a huge financial drain.
So Plantoa uses AI to help businesses make these incredibly fast, complex decisions before that window closes. But wait, here's the wild irony of this entire deep dive.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Right. Liat is building an AI company to solve this massive supply chain problem, but at the exact same time, she is raising a massive warning flag about how we actually use AI to make these decisions.
Yeah, and this leads us to her concept of authority drift, which honestly might be her most profound observation.
It's definitely the most chilling part of the research.
We are aggressively deploying AI systems across every industry right now to handle complexity and speed, but in doing so, we are creating a hidden structural danger within our own organizations. Liat defines authority drift as the gradual shift in perceived legitimacy from human agents to automated systems, specifically through repeated cognitive delegation.
Okay, I need to push back on this terminology for a second. If an AI system is highly accurate at forecasting inventory in that 4 to 8 week window, isn't offloading that cognitive task just good business efficiency?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Right. So why is she calling it a drift, which sounds insidious and kind of dangerous, instead of just a standard shift or a handoff of the task?
That distinction is actually the entire point of her warning. A handoff implies a conscious, formal transfer of power. Like a manager actively decides, okay, the software is now officially in charge of ordering bananas, and I am no longer responsible.
A clear line in the sand.
Right. But authority drift is dangerous precisely because it happens without any formal moment of authorization. It just slips in unnoticed through our daily habits.
So how does that actually happen on the warehouse floor? How does the authority move if nobody officially changes the rules or the job descriptions?
It happens through a very specific set of conditions. First, the direction is always away from the human and toward the system. And the force driving this isn't a single dramatic policy change from the CEO. It is simply repeated cognitive delegation.
Meaning just using the tool day after day.
Exactly. Every single time an employee asks the AI to analyze a spreadsheet or summarize a report, interpret demand, or recommend an order, they are delegating a tiny piece of cognitive work. And over time, relying on the system just starts to feel completely normal.
It is a gradual accumulation. By the time the company realizes what has happened, the practical expectation of who is actually making the decisions has entirely changed.
And that changes the perceived legitimacy of the system. And legitimacy is not just about trusting the AI to do math correctly. It is the underlying feeling that the system has the actual standing to shape judgment.
Wow, so the culture changes.
Right. Eventually, the culture shifts to a point where employees feel they need a compelling, heavily documented reason to disagree with the system rather than the other way around. Yet, formally, nothing has changed at all.
The organizational chart is identical.
Exactly. The human is still officially responsible. The company policy still explicitly states the AI is merely an advisor. But in practice, the authority has already completely moved. People go to the AI first, and they just accept its answers by default.
She actually uses this symbolic formula to map out this behavior in the sources. And if you think about it logically, it makes terrifying sense.
It really does.
Basically, as our reliance on the AI goes up, the human friction of actually sitting down to make the decision goes down. Because it is easier and faster, the system becomes the default starting point. And because it is the default, the perceived legitimacy of the system goes up in the eyes of the workers.
And as a direct result of all that, the practical authority of the human quietly plummets.
That's just wild. But I know it is vital to distinguish authority drift from the outcomes people usually worry about with AI. For instance, people often talk about disempowerment.
Right, but disempowerment is just the outcome. It is what happens to the human at the very end of the process. Authority drift is the silent mechanism that actually gets you there.
And people also talk about algorithmic authority.
Which is the destination where the system is officially recognized as the boss. Authority drift is the quiet, undocumented journey to that destination.
Let's bring this back to the supply chain for a minute. What is the actual tangible danger if the AI is making the calls on how many pallets of tahini to order? I mean, if it's accurate, who cares?
The danger is the complete loss of organizational memory. And it's driven by what Liat calls defensive reliance.
Defensive reliance, tell me about that.
Imagine a mid-level inventory planner. The AI recommends ordering 10,000 extra units of a product. The planner looks at it and thinks, you know, that looks wrong based on my 10 years of experience, but, and this is the kicker, if they override the AI and they are wrong, they get fired.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But if they just follow the AI's recommendation and the AI is wrong, they can just blame the system. It is much, much safer for their career to engage in defensive
The
reliance.
sense of reliance. Hey, don't blame me. The computer told me to do it.
Exactly.
That is a massive aha moment for me. A human might be officially in the loop,
Yeah.
technically signing off on the purchase orders, but their judgment has been entirely hollowed out. They were just rubber stamping the machine to protect their own job.
And when everyone in the company does that, the human expertise within the organization just atrophies. Practical authority has drifted entirely to the machine, and the humans literally forget how to make the decisions themselves.
That is a subtle but incredibly profound shift in how we work, and it really ties this whole deep dive together.
It does.
Let's quickly recap this journey for you listening today. We started in the messy, chaotic spreadsheets of an early 2000s ERP data migration in Israel, where we saw how standardizing software accidentally taught the world a unified operational language.
Right, the accidental Rosetta Stone.
Yes, and we saw how Liat Portal maintained a stable cognitive signature, taking her deep understanding of how systems behave under pressure and applying it to everything from Parkinson's disease to the global trade of a single banana in her Foodie Disorder newsletter.
Which is just a brilliant way to view the world. We then explored the critical execution gap in modern business and why Plantoid focuses so aggressively on that make-or-break 4 to 8 week window.
Because a forecast you cannot act on is a forecast you cannot eat.
Exactly. And finally, we unpacked the silent structural threat of authority drift, where humans gradually and informally surrender their cognitive legitimacy to AI systems simply because it is easier and safer for their careers.
It all connects. It is all about seeing the invisible systems that run our world, from massive global logistics down to our own daily cognitive habits, and fighting to maintain our agency within them.
And for you listening, whether you are planning a massive corporate supply chain or you are just trying to navigate your daily workflow in a world increasingly filled with AI tools, the core lesson here is vigilance.
You have to stay awake at the wheel.
Right. You must remain intensely aware of where and how often you are delegating your own cognitive authority. Because once the drift takes hold and you start relying on the system by default, it is exceptionally hard to reverse.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on today. We talked earlier about that empty supermarket shelf during COVID, a crisis that broke all the supply chain models because there was no historical data for a global lockdown.
The models were totally blind to it.
Exactly. So if our global food supply, our trade routes, and our daily operations are increasingly managed by AI systems, and authority drift causes human workers to quietly surrender their judgment and their organizational memory to those systems, what happens when a truly unprecedented, off-the-charts global crisis hits next?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because the AI won't have the historical data to predict it, but by then, will we have completely forgotten how to make the decisions required to survive it?
It raises a terrifying thought. When the screens go blank, will anyone left in the building actually know how to steer the ship?
It's something to think about. Next time you grab that banana, maybe give the invisible web a second thought. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.